This is the Digging for Truth podcast, presented by the Associates for Biblical Research, demonstrating the historical reliability of the Bible through archaeological and biblical research.
When the Israelites began conquering the Promised Land, the book of Joshua describes Canaan as being controlled by a coalition of kings in numerous city-states. Fast forwarding a few thousand years, in the 1880s, an archive of clay tablets was discovered in Amarna, Egypt. So what do tablets in Egypt have to do with the Promised Land? Well, they've come to be known as the Amarna Letters, and they've been mentioned on a couple of our past podcasts, so we thought it would be interesting to look some more in depth at this archaeological discovery that parallels the events of the Bible. Henry Smith had a chance to talk about the contents of these letters with archaeologist Dr. Scott Stripling. Dr. Stripling is the provost at the Bible Seminary in Katy, Texas, and is the director of excavations for the archaeological dig at Shiloh, Israel, the site which held the tabernacle for 3 centuries and included the Ark of the Covenant. Here's Henry.
Scott, welcome back to Digging for Truth. It's good to see you.
Hey, Henry, I'm excited to be with you today.
All right. Well, we're here today. We're going to talk about the Amarna Letters. Let's begin with the question for someone who's not familiar. You know, sort of when, where, and who related to the Amarna Letters, and I'll let you go ahead with that.
Well, I'll just give you sort of a general overview. We have 382 tablets that were discovered at Tel El Amarna in Egypt, which of course was Akhenaten's capital when he sort of centralized and created this new kingdom down in Upper Egypt. And they were discovered accidentally, sort of like the Dead Sea Scrolls, and a lot of them ended up on the antiquities market. They were then gathered over several decades, and altogether we have about 382. They are clay tablets. They're written in cuneiform, and which is a type of Babylonian script, sort of the international language of correspondence at the time in the late Bronze Age. And they date to the 14th century BC. So if we are dating, as you and I would agree, the Exodus to about 1446 and the beginning of the conquest to about 1406 and the end of the conquest around, 1399 or thereabouts, the beginning of the 14th century, then these would date to about 1370 to 1340. So primarily in the reigns of Amenhotep III and Amenhotep IV, which would be in Egypt's New Kingdom. So when we talk about the New Kingdom, we're talking about the 18th, 19th, and 20th dynasties. Okay,
so this archive, about 380 tablets, they're found in Egypt, but they originated from Canaan. So the question is, of course, who wrote them? And we see in the letters actually who wrote them. People designate themselves. Let's talk about that a little bit, Scott.
Okay, well, they're not all from Canaan. We have 382, and maybe 41 of them are from further north in the Levant. So you have rulers in the north and in Hatti and Hittite rulers and so forth that are sort of those northern Naharim type rulers, and they're very different. Those are like brother-to-brother letters, or Egypt is seen as kind of the first among equals with these guys, and the way they address each other is very, very different. Like you have one example where one of the rulers is saying to Pharaoh, you said you were going to send me your daughter in marriage and you didn't do it, and I'm very disappointed, and this is going to hurt our relationship. You would never get that kind of confrontation in the Canaanite letters themselves. So let's just say that about 382 letters exist, and you have about 41 of them that are from these equal, if you will, brothers of Pharaoh, and then we have the rest from the Canaanite city-states.
Okay, so you're indicating that the nature of this correspondence from the Canaanite kings is quite different. The language is different. What they say is quite different. And when you read the translation of it, it's really fascinating. But I won't step on your toes with that. I want to let you describe some of what we see in these letters. It's really fascinating.
Well, there are a series of correspondence from these Canaanite client kings. They are clearly paying tribute to Pharaoh. They point that out repeatedly, and they're not getting their protection. So Pharaoh is supposed to protect them. They're paying him tribute. These are his cities. They make it very clear. They are vassal kings, or rulers, mayors. It's really only the ruler of Hatzor that's called a king. The others, maybe we should call them mayors or rulers. And that's kind of consistent with what we read in the Bible as well, that the king of Hatzor was above the other kings. He was their chief. But it's a series of complaints from these Canaanite rulers to Pharaoh that he's not keeping up his end of the bargain, and they're being overrun by these marauders known as Habiru. Now, I should point out that the language, while we say that it's Akkadian, it's really a Canaanite dialect of Akkadian. So it's not the pure Akkadian that maybe you would get in those 41 letters from the brother to brother, but it's sort of a vulgarized version of that, which is maybe what you would expect in the provinces.
Yeah, and to help the audience with that, the Akkadian language goes back to probably 2000 BC or before that, and then it evolves over time, but it became the sort of lingua franca, kind of like the way that English is today. You know, when you and I go to Israel, we're blessed that we don't have to speak Hebrew. The common tongue there is English, and that's the common way that people talk to each other. So Akkadian is much the same way in that, but with this Canaanite twist is what I hear you saying.
That's right.
All right. So they're writing to the Pharaoh. They're complaining about the Habiru. What are the Habiru doing? What is it? What is the issue going on there in the correspondence?
Well, the Habiru, Apiru, if you're several ways of spelling it, but we'll just call them Habiru for now. They appear in the literary record maybe in the 17th or 18th century BC. So it's not brand new to the late Bronze Age 2 period. So the term can be a general term for marauders, brigands, if you will, the dispossessed who are trying to get their share of the Robin Hoods of the day. But it becomes very specifically applied to these guys in Canaan at the time that the Bible says that the conquest was taking place. So at the beginning of the period of the Judges, when they're continuing now, after having gained a foothold, to then impress the conquest. And these people seem to match very, very closely the biblical Hebrews. And it would be a long thing to get into to talk about sort of the etymology of the word and what it might tie to. But not all Habiru are Hebrews, but I think all Hebrews are Habiru.
Yeah, it's really fascinating. But fundamentally, if you're a king in Canaan and the Israelites have come into the land and they're trying to take over, what designation would you use to describe them? This is the term from the ancient Near East that one would use for maybe a vandal would be a later sort of kind of idea, right? Am I right about that?
Yeah, and we have a similar term, shasu, like the shasu of Yahweh. Yes. So shasu can be a general sort of marauder, also like Habiru. But there are some shasu who worship Yahweh, we know from the Soleb hieroglyphs. So yes, these interesting terms, shasu and Habiru, and then in the Bible you get the idea of the Giborim, like the mighty men, the mighty warriors. So this is a warrior class that seems to be dispossessed, but they're in the process of taking over.
Right, and we think there's a great correlation with the Bible there. Now, Scott, we were sort of trying to start to make connections between these nefarious characters entering the land of Canaan, which the kings or rulers are complaining about to Pharaoh, the Habiru. But let's talk about another aspect of the way that the political structure of Canaan is sort of described in the biblical text and in the Amarna Letters, and I'll let you explain that.
Think of the American colonies in the period of colonization. So these are colonies, and they clearly belong to King George. Okay, so he is in charge, and it would be inaccurate to refer to Americans independently at that point. They're British. They're just British citizens that are part of the colonies. And that's how these city-states are. They are clearly under the hegemony of Egypt. They pay tribute to Egypt. They're loyal to Egypt. And we know at a number of places, like at Bet Shean, we've got Egyptian fortresses that are there in that time period. So when we have Israelites entering the land around 1400 and encountering these Egyptian city-states. I think it's an error to think of them only as Canaanite city-states, maybe Canaanite Egyptian city-states. It's really a continuation of the battle that they had been fighting for a long time. Now let me illustrate that for you. We have the city-state of Shechem in the north, the city-state of Jerusalem in the south, and probably Hatzor and Megiddo would qualify as well. But we see a very different attitude at Shechem than we find at Jerusalem. So Abdihiba, the king of Jerusalem, in 285 to 290, is complaining vociferously, that he's losing everything. Nobody else is loyal to Pharaoh except him. These people at Shechem in the city-state, they've all crossed over to the Habiru. They've allied themselves with them, and now Pharaoh is going to lose all of his land. So that this interesting political divisions and petty bickering that you would expect, if Pharaoh's in charge, and now, all the sort of commoners are bickering to him and giving him their point of view.
Yeah, when they're complaining too, it's interesting. In the one letter, I can't remember which one it is. He calls the other king a dog. He's like a Habiru, So it's that kind of thing that's going on between them. They're bickering, and the Israelites, we think, are the ones that are causing this disruption to the culture there.
Yeah, I mean, to be frank, I think the Israelites are the Habiru. In this case, I think we have a direct synchronism between the text and what we find there. When you read the beginning of these letters, I love the way that they self-deprecate. I prostrate myself before the king 7 times on my front, 7 times on my back. I'm dust before your feet. Now, when the emissary would deliver the letter, he would literally do that, Henry. He would lie before Pharaoh. He would roll over 7 times from front to back as he's reciting this letter before he delivered it. And all we have are the letters from the Egyptian Canaanite city-states. We don't have Pharaoh's response in any of these. So either he was unwilling or unable, or the correspondence just simply didn't survive. And all we have, like in late Bronze Age Jerusalem, is one fragment that Elat Mazar found on the Ophel and published of either an archival copy or some sort of response that was in there. But the letters 285 to 290 talk extensively about late Bronze Age Jerusalem, and we have no architecture. I mean, look in the city of David, no architecture from that time. You've got late Bronze Age pottery that's here and there.
Right.
And then we have these letters. Henry, no one doubts that the Jerusalem was occupied in the late Bronze Age. Why? Because of the Amarna Letters. Now, guess what? We don't have evidence of Jerusalem being occupied in the intermediate Bronze Age, but the Bible says that it was, talking about the Abraham narratives. Yet, scholars would be quick to say, so the Bible's incorrect. So you see, the Amarna Letters get the assumption of innocence, and the Bible has the assumption of guilt.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. We see that methodological inconsistency from our secular friends who are studying the Bible and its relationship to the archaeology, and we're pointing that out. At the very least, treat it in a consistent fashion. So now, I wasn't going to ask you this, Scott, but maybe comment on, we don't, this is typical in the Bible, though. There's a lot of gaps. God doesn't tell us a lot of what's going on in the ancient Near East. It mentions nothing about Egypt's presence in Canaan. But the archaeology helps us to sort of draw a bigger mosaic of what's happening. Maybe comment on the absence of that and why that's not a problem.
Yeah, it's really neat because the only new information we're getting about the Bible is from archaeology these days. So it helps us illuminate the text, whether it's artifact, to something textual like the Dead Sea Scrolls or the Amarna Letters. And, it's interesting because that really amplifies the 14th century for us. And right after the conquest, or part of the conquest perhaps, we don't know really much about the 15th century and much about the 13th century. We don't really have texts that amplify that, other than maybe the accounts of victory battles, like with Thutmose III. But here you get an amplification and an illumination of the biblical world that's very valuable.
Yeah, and so in terms of you and I have talked about this a lot about methodology. We take the biblical text very seriously, and it has interpretive priority. But there's so much from the world of archaeology that just helps us understand it better. So it's not the key to understanding it, but it's so helpful and this is a kind of situation that just speaks to that so well for us.
Yeah, it really does. And not only that, but we find theological implications that are illuminated as well. For example, the moral issue of the conquest, which is what some people have termed as genocide.
Right, and we want to tell our audience, first of all, that Scott Lancer and I did a 2-part episode on the sort of the theology, the ethics of that particular issue because of the killing of women and children in particular, and the judgment of God and His holiness and all that. But this Egyptian component is not in the biblical text, and your contention is that this may be, part of God's acting against Egypt.
That's right. I mean, these city-states are part of Egypt. And so what started in Egypt, it's not over yet. I mean, They have enslaved the Israelites. From the Hebrew children that were, ordered to be killed by Pharaoh, and then the enslavement, and then the attempt of the Egyptian army to slaughter them. These people have sworn to kill the Israelites. And I think that gives a context to the whole concept.
That's excellent, Scott. Well, you're suggesting something unique. I've not heard the suggestion before, to be honest with you, that because these are Egyptian vassals, this could be seen as an extension of what God did against Pharaoh in Egypt. Maybe comment on that a little bit further, just build on that thought.
Yeah, it's like the punishment on Pharaoh and on Egypt is continuing on the 18th dynasty, because here, not only did he lose his military and his labor force, and not only did he suffer all of these ecological disasters and the death of his own son, but now you have the loss of his colonies. And when you lose your colonies, you're being dispossessed of your financial resources. So these Egyptian Canaanite city-states are crossing over to the Habiru. And what we should read into that is financial disaster, number one. And number two, just as Egypt was committed to slaughtering the Hebrews, these vassals must do the same thing. And so when the Israelites have a cherem, or an all-out war with them, that's what's been declared on them.
Yeah, it's really interesting. It helps sort of bring the bigger picture, like I said, mosaic of what's happening in the background here to help us understand it better. Maybe you could comment a little bit about, we didn't mention this, that the peak of Egypt's control over Canaan was in the reign of Thutmose III, and we see sort of a slow degradation of that. Maybe comment on that, because that's over a period of, a century or so, perhaps?
Well, I mean, Thutmose III is the greatest of all the pharaohs. I mean, they reach their height of power and control and influence. He has a very long reign, and we have his victory stele at Megiddo. So in the 15th century, we clearly see that Pharaoh, this is 18th dynasty, goes in and conquers Canaan, subjugates them. They're all paying tribute. And we see the same thing in the 13th century. Ramesses II is a very powerful pharaoh, and we know that he does the same thing. We don't have that sort of royal data in the 14th century, but what we have, I think, is even more valuable. We have this Amarna, correspondence, and so we see Egypt. They really don't have anywhere to go but down from Thutmose III, because he's about as good as they come. But yeah, as you move through the subsequent reigns, then you see a gradual, not to say that the bottom has fallen out until maybe after Amenhotep II, you see a serious drop that takes place there.
I think that's an excellent picture. As is just, again, it gives us just a broader scope of what's happening there in terms of Egypt and all that's happening in the political structure of what's going on at this time. Maybe let's move back a little bit to, you mentioned earlier about the Egyptian garrisons in Canaan. If I understand it right, most of them are in the lowlands, and they're not mentioned again in the biblical text. And these are places that the Israelites don't conquer Beth Shan you mentioned before, and a couple of other garrisons. Maybe talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, they are, like at Jaffa, for example. You have very strong Egyptian influence there, and temples and garrisons down on the coast. But the most interesting one to me is at Bet Shean, and because visitors can go there today if they're able to climb the ancient hill and visit what was there. So the way I picture it is this: that if one of these vassal states was getting out of line, which clearly they're all out of line at this point through the Amarna Letters, then there's a garrison station there that will go and pull them up short and collect tribute, conquer them, kill them, whatever needs to be done. So Egypt has a presence in the Jordan Valley at Bet Shean. They've got a presence on the coast and probably other places too. Now, we do get mentions of Egyptians in certain biblical passages, sort of out of nowhere, that this Egyptian was there. And it probably didn't have to be explained back then because they all knew it. But for us, this is where archaeology really helps us flesh it out.
How about the other thought was this has been discussed before too, like the cities that the Israelites actually conquer, such as Ai and Jericho. Do we find tablets, correspondence from those places, or is that absent? And how would that fit with the record in your judgment?
Yeah, well, we have Canaan, you're in the provinces, and so you're not going to get the type of literary output that you would in Mesopotamia or in Egypt, but you do get hints here and there. You have fragments of cuneiform tablets at Hatzor. You have the one I mentioned earlier at Jerusalem, but again, just fragments of these that survive. The ruins in Canaan, Israel, southern Levant, unfortunately, are not nearly as well preserved as they are in other parts of the ancient Near East. As we are excavating conquest sites, and that's really been the mission of ABR, we're focused on these sites from the period of the conquest and taking a regional approach. What we want to do is to take the material culture and any texts that can shed light on that as well. And this is all we've got, Henry. I mean, we have the Amarna Letters, and what more could we ask for? Because we have hundreds of letters explaining real life situations that are going on in the land of the Bible at the time of the conquest. We've got real people's names, and we've got places that are confirmed. We've got a verisimilitude even with terminology like what a footstool is. So we read in the Psalms that heaven is his throne, the earth is his footstool. You find that type of language in the Amarna Letters. So it's very consistent with what you would expect to see at that time.
Well, that's excellent, Scott. Well, we're going to move to a new idea that you have about one of the tablets, which is fascinating. But before we do that, let's zero in on a series of letters 285 to 290. Mm-hmm. They are from the king of Jerusalem, and I won't say any more. I'll let you explain further.
Yeah, 285 to 290, and these have been artificially numbered. They're not like on the tablets, 285 to 290, but we have scholars like Albright early on did some really good work on this, and you got to really admire him because he was breaking new ground on it. And then in more recent times, Anson Rainey, recently deceased, and William Moran has a classic text on it, and those are the sources that we usually go to. But it's an ongoing source of PhD dissertations being written on this, and who knows if there will be other Amarna tablets that will surface at some point that will give us additional insights. So. Interesting series of correspondence when we focus on 285 to 290, which are the Jerusalem letters. And these are written from Abdi-Heba, king of Jerusalem. And, and the Bible gives us the name of the king at the time of the conquest as Adonai-Zedek. And so either Abdi-Heba is the king that follows Adonai-Zedek after he's killed, or it's a synonymous name, perhaps.
Okay, very good. So the date is about 30-year period, early Judges. So at least the conventional dating, this is where we think this is pretty accurate. So it's interesting because Joshua 10 indicates that the king was killed. There was a coalition of kings that Joshua defeated at Makkedah, I believe, is the place where that occurred. but it doesn't say that they conquered the city. And so this would be consistent with that sort of, we don't see a text where it says that they took control of Jerusalem. And so we have Abdi-Heba. What's he saying there in these correspondences to Pharaoh?
Yeah, he's crying out to Pharaoh and complaining. We're going to look at 288 in a minute, and I'll give you some examples of specific complaints that he has. But he's whining about the other city-states, and they're not doing their part, and they're helping the enemy, and they're throwing Pharaoh under the bus and talking trash behind his back and so forth. So it's a series of petty complaints, but really, he's making a good point, is that I still want to be loyal to you, and I want to pay my tribute this year, but I'm not going to be able to if you don't send us some military help.
Yeah, it includes, if I remember reading from the text, archers. He's asking for archers to be sent. He's asking for help. Mm-hmm. So what does he need help from? I mean, who's the problem here? That's afflicting poor Abdi-Heba.
Well, it's the Habiru, and they are overrunning these cities. And some of the cities, like Shechem, famously, they have allied themselves. The king of Shechem and his sons, they have allied themselves. And so that entire Shechem city-state has gone Hebrew. It's gone Habiru at this point, which is, again, very consistent with what we read in the conquest. And, we're taking the reading of the Masoretic text and putting us for a conquest around 1400. If you were to take the Septuagint reading, that would take off 40 years, and it would put you then in the mid-14th century, around 1360, which, very interesting, would be right in the middle of this when it's taking place. So it's interesting to look at it from two different lenses. So either it's just after the conquest and it's the ongoing conquest, or phase 2 of the conquest, or if one were taking the Septuagint reading, you would see this as literally an unfolding of the biblical conquest.
Right. So, after the Israelites conquer Joshua 8, they go right up to Shechem in Joshua 9 to perform the covenant renewal ceremony, right?
Right.
And so talk about that in terms of how the Amarna Letters sort of fill in, explain, well, how did they do that? They didn't fight a war. There's no indication of a war. Maybe talk about that a little bit.
Right. So it's actually at the end of chapter 8, they do what Moses told them to do. He said, when you go into the land and you gain a foothold, you're going to go and renew covenant with me with Mount Gerizim on one side, Mount Ebal on the other, and he gives them all these details. So they do it after victory at Ai, and the people at Shechem don't fight the Israelites. Instead, they join in with them. And the text says that all Israel joined in together, alien and citizen alike. And so the people of Shechem apparently are embracing monotheism or Yahwehism, and maybe this goes back to the deep patriarchal roots at Shechem. And so what I see in that then is very consistent with what we read in the Amarna Letters, that there's an affinity between the people of Shechem and the Habiru. And if Shechem is the head of the city-state, then cities like Shiloh are part of the Shechem city-state. And we see nothing in the Bible about a conquest or a battle at Shiloh, just as Joshua set up the tabernacle there. Yet we know archaeologically that there were people who were there.
Excellent. So what we have described in the biblical text is the southern campaign, Joshua 10. Then, and you have this covenant renewal ceremony that takes place just before that's described. You have the northern campaign, and you have this lacuna in between of no campaign.
Right.
And yet in the Amarna Letters are saying that the Shechemites are consorting with the Habiru.
Yeah.
What a fascinating connection.
It's very fascinating. It's very consistent with what we would expect it to be. We don't find anything in the Amarna Letters that contradicts what we would expect it to be from reading the biblical text.
Okay, Scott, so we set the stage. We've been telling the audience here a little bit that we may have a Shiloh connection with the Amarna Letters, but I'm going to let you sort of pull back the curtain on that and see how persuasive your suggestion is.
Okay, well, all dig directors are guilty of seeing the whole world through the prism of their dig side, okay? So we have a saying in Spanish that every mother blackbird thinks her little bird is the blackest. So clearly, I think that my side is the best side, and I want to see everything through that prism. But in just studying the Amarna Letters, when I came across this, I began to explore it, and it just seemed like it was, the further I got, that it was really something serious that we should talk about. And so I've run this by Egyptologists that are very renowned, by Assyriologists and linguists, and everybody seems to agree with me that this should have serious consideration. So let's talk about EA 288. So remember that 285 to 290 are the Abdihiba Jerusalem letters. And this 288 kind of gets to the heart of what we want to talk about. And it begins with this whole thing: I prostrate myself before the king 7 times. And behold, I'm a friend of the king and a tribute bearer. In other words, I'm a financial supporter. He's reminding him that, I'm a resource for you. Then he goes on giving other complaints. My father and my mother didn't place me on the throne, but your royal hand did. And then I'll just kind of read a bit here. He says, and so I sent 10 slaves to you, 2 girls and 8 prisoners, and made the king give thought to his land. So he doesn't claim that he owns the land. He says it's Pharaoh's land. The land of the king is lost. All of it has attacked me. And so, in other words, I alone am holding out for you here. I am at war as far as the land of Seru and as far as Ginti Kirmil. All the mayors are at peace, but I am at war. So he's clearly begging for help. I am treated like an apiru. Now here we go again. So they're treating me like I'm a monotheist, one of these despised dogs, these brigands. And I do not visit the king, my lord, since I'm at war. So that's why I haven't been to see you. I am situated like a ship at sea. So this interesting simile here. I'm a ship that's at sea, and I can't quite get to the king. The strong hand or arm of the king took the land of Naharima and the land of Kasi, but now the Apiru have taken the very cities of the king. So who's in control in Canaan, Henry?
Sounds like the Abiru to me, and not Abdihiba, or not the king, not the pharaoh. It's being relinquished.
Yeah, so the pharaoh was in control or is in control, and it's in the process of being lost. So even after the initial conquest, it's still Egypt who's in control in Canaan. So here we go. Not a single mare remains to the king, my lord. All are lost. And then we get down to the Shiloh section, verses 41 to 47 in 288. Behold, Turbasu was slain in the city gate of Silu. Silu. Now, we call this toponymy, the study of the similarity of place names. So Silu, what could this possibly mean? What are the possibilities? Well, scholars up to this point have taken this to mean Sile or Churu, if you translate it, which is a fort down on the Egyptian fortress near the Bala Lakes in Egypt proper.
Okay.
Now, if that's true, then it is out of character with everything else in the Amarna Letters, because why would cities in Egypt proper be attacked by the Habiru, for one thing, and why would they need protection? He's talking about Canaanite city-states and locations that are being sieged and turning over, and then he automatically throws out this Sile, they would say, the fort, or could Silu be Shiloh here? Kerbit Silun, Silo, as we would know it today.
Okay.
And so I ran this by prominent Egyptologists that you've had on the show, and by an Assyriologist to make sure that the translation worked from one language to another. They all agree that it could very well be Shiloh. Silu could be Shiloh. In fact, it fits better in the context of what we're exploring here. Now, think about what the Bible says of the gate of Shiloh. Not only do we have a gate of Shiloh mentioned here, but in the Bible we know that Shiloh has a gate, and that Eli dies in the gate of Shiloh. So interesting to keep that in mind. Now, we've not yet discovered the gate from that time period, but we think we know where it is. Now, he makes an accusation here, which is very rare in an Amarna letter. Usually they're sucking up to the king, but he says the king did nothing. Behold, servants who were joined to the Apiru, Zimreda of Lakishu, which is Lachish, and Yapti Hada was slain in the city gate of Silu. So there you have it again. two people, Turbasu and Yapitada, are slain in the city gate of Shiloh, and the king did nothing.
So let's backtrack a hair. The standard translation of Shiloh has been this fort down in the near the Egyptian delta. Doesn't make sense contextually. Maybe linguistically it might, but not contextually. In fact, you have Lachish mentioned in this context too, which is up in Canaan, right? This is mentioned in Joshua and a number of other places. So,
and even if, let's say, linguistically it's a possibility, it's no greater possibility than Shiloh would be. So they're equal linguistically, but contextually,
your
it's
argument,
inferior.
Yes, much better. Now, these two individuals, we don't know who they are, but the pharaoh must have been familiar with who they were. So they must have been significant people. Maybe they were maybe they were kings or administrators or something like that.
Yeah, that's what it seems, because the emissary of Pharaoh, he's named earlier, his name is Suta. He's the commissioner of the king, or the emissary of the king, the one who's in charge, probably goes by collecting tribute, for Pharaoh. So this is a name that Pharaoh is supposed to know, or these names he's supposed to know. And this is important because as we excavate at Shiloh and continue to excavate in the coming decade there, and we find inscriptions, these are the types of names that will be on our radar.
Yeah, excellent. All right, that sets it up. This really is a groundbreaking theory that you're putting forth, and I don't mean just an esoteric theory. It certainly makes a lot of sense on the surface. We're going to explore it further. Okay, so Scott, maybe one question is, the different vowels that are in here. Like, so we have Shiloh, Shiloh. Just explain maybe about translation, especially of proper names, and what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, vowels are problematic. Normally, in most ancient languages, you tend to have the consonantal script, and then exactly what vowels go in. Sometimes that's negotiable.
Yes.
What you're putting in there. And so this is why I talked at length with an Assyriologist, because we're talking about a Babylonian script. And I wanted to make sure that in the translation, by the time we get it into English as Shiloh, that we're not playing with the vowels in a way that's not allowable in the language. And he affirmed that it translates very clearly, and it could very well be Shiloh.
And the S and the sh sound are very close to one another, and sometimes those were conflated as well. Am I right about that? Even though those are consonants. Okay. So maybe for audience members who might be asking why the difference, we have this translation issue between, especially a language like Akkadian, which is a dead language. So whereas Hebrew is still a live language. So if this is correct, this is telling us that there is a city gate, which would imply a fortification structure around Shiloh in the early 14th century BC. Talk about that a little bit, and as an archaeologist, that's got your ears up in terms of your long-term planning.
Yeah, it really does, because the Bible tells us that there's a gate at Shiloh in the Bronze Age, and now we have a second witness to that, if indeed Shiloh is equal to Shiloh here. We think it's in the southern approach. If someone is coming to Shiloh today from sort of the visitor center and they're coming up from the south to the north, there's that gentle slope, and you've got Byzantine and Roman ruins there, remains, very nice, olive presses and things like that. I think it's underneath there, and that stuff's going to have to be removed. Of course, this is going to take money to remove it, to restore it, and put it somewhere else, and I think that's where we're going to find the gate that's referred to.
Very good. Now, would you say also, perhaps, now be careful about inferences, but if the Israelites, the Habiru, killed these two individuals, this could imply that maybe there was a small-scale battle that took place at Shiloh, and it's just not recorded in the Bible.
That's right.
Perhaps. So if there was a destruction involved, we would want to look for that, perhaps. Now, the biblical text doesn't tell us any of that. But this is where we're allowed to innovate a little bit. As long as we're not violating the text of Scripture, we can have innovation in the work of archaeology. Maybe comment on that a little bit about that relationship.
Well, I mean, but here's another possibility. Maybe these two gentlemen, I'll give you their names again, Turbasu and Yatihada, they may have been outsiders, like representatives of Pharaoh, Egyptians, who are attempting to come into Shiloh which is under Habiru control, and they don't make it in, they're killed in the gate.
Very good.
That's normally where you would have archers, and your military would be supporting the gate.
Okay.
They're trying to come in, and so the king's representatives may be killed there by those occupying Shiloh, which, according to the Bible, that's Joshua in the Hebrews. According to the Amarna Letters, in my view, that's the Habiru.
The Habiru. Okay, so that's good. That's another possible inference. Maybe not a battle, what I'm suggesting, but maybe they're emissaries that are sent that are just assassinated, basically, is what it comes down to, right?
Yeah, and I'm not aware of any other letter among the Amarna correspondence where you have that, where two people are called by name and they're killed in the gate of a city.
Yeah, so it's very specific, and obviously the Pharaoh must have known. It's an appeal to the Pharaoh. You've not done anything. Look, these two guys were killed. He's got to know who they are, it seems to me.
Sure.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. All right, so let's begin to sort of assimilate the larger picture here, Scott. Like, let's just draw back a little bit from, okay, we went down, narrowed to the Shiloh reference, but that bigger picture coming back from that again, if you would, for the audience.
Yeah, so again, we have this Amarna correspondence. We're zeroing in on 285 to 290 letters from Abdihiba, king of Jerusalem. And I did not mention earlier that petrographic analysis has been done on these tablets where they scraped off a little bit of the clay, and sure enough, it's Jerusalem clay. So that gives it a proximity and a verisimilitude. We're saying that 288, one part of this Jerusalem correspondence, mentions a city called Shiloh that scholars up to this point have suggested was Sileh or Churu, a fortress down in the Bala Lakes area of Egypt. And what I'm saying is that's very out of context with what we read in the Amarna Letters, which are all about these Egyptian Canaanite city-states, and that the toponymy, the etymology, if you will, works just as well with Shiloh as it does with Sileh. So S-I-L-E or S-I-L-U. So we got a vowel difference there. It could work either way. If the Habiru are the Hebrews, which I argued in 5 Views of the Exodus and others have written about, and if Shiloh is Shiloh, then we are really beginning, Henry, to get a picture of what life was like in Canaan at the time of the conquest.
Yeah, it really does. And this shows you the value of archaeology when it's used properly in the ministerial support of the Word of God. It shows you, oh, Scott, it's so exciting because it's like this eyewitness nature of the text too. The biblical text is said to have been written centuries later, and this archaeology really goes against that whole construct. I give you 30 seconds to wrap it all up, Scott, the whole Amarna letter importance. Go ahead.
Well, we have an ancient witness. Not only the special revelation of the Bible, but the material culture is an additional witness that amplifies and illuminates. And in the case of those of us excavating in the hill country and interested in conquest sites, the Amarna Letters are gold. And so Amarna Letter 288 is going to be something we're going to be studying about, probably writing and researching on in the coming years.
Well, thanks, Scott, for joining us, and thanks for all the hard work you do and your expertise. We love you, man. We appreciate you.
Thank you, man.
The conquest of Canaan is one of ABR's area of study. So if you want to know more about the Amarna Letters or stuff related to the conquest, we'll put a few links in the show notes as always. And if you're interested in joining Dr. Stripling at his excavation at Shiloh, you can sign up to be a volunteer, and you can find all that information at digshiloh.org. Until next time.
Digging for Truth is a presentation of the Associates for Biblical Research. To find out more about ABR, just go to BibleArchaeology.org.